Hi, good day, everyone. I am Gordon Rankin, the New Hampshire Conference Minister, and we are starting something new here at the New Hampshire Conference. We are starting to put together a series of webinars that will cover a variety of topics, everything from ministry practices to justice issues to thinking about some contemporary ways to worship. We expect over time we will explore it all. We are hoping to produce one or two of these each month, so be on the lookout for them. We will include them as soon as we do them in the next week's weekly news. We will also be archiving them on the conference website in a location that is yet to be set up, so we will let you know where that is as we go along. But the hope is, and some of these topics are going to be particularly timely and some will be more timeless. Our hope is that you will be able to go back and if you're a church looking for information on setting up trusts, that you'll be able to go back 2 years later and find some of that information and learn from that and don't have to be present to it in that very moment or that day. Hopefully we'll come up with lots of good topics to resource our local churches. That's the goal and the plan. And we would certainly welcome your input on topics that you would like to have included in our webinars. You can email any ideas to me at grankin, Grankin, at nhcucc.org. So for our first webinar try today, we are doing something that is a common experience to several of us, which is we're talking about the 2019 General Synod, which took place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the week of June 21st through 25th. The General Synod is the biannual meeting of the National Gathering of the United Church of Christ, which plots the course for the United Church of Christ as a national denomination for the next 2 years. And we have with us today 5 of our 13 delegates to General Synod from the New Hampshire Conference, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. One of our delegates is actually on the phone. We're going to start with her. Stacy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Stacy Colgren, and I am from the Southwest Association. My home church is the United Church of Jaffrey. I serve in Central Massachusetts as an intentional interim.
Thank you, Stacy. Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Casey, and I'm from Ringe, New Hampshire, and I'm a member of the Ringe UCC Church, and I attended as an alternate this year.
Thank you. Don.
Hi, I'm Don Bliss. I'm a member of the First Congregational Church in Hampton, and this was actually my second synod, which I was very proud to serve as a voting delegate.
Thank you. And the voter boys.
I'm Robert, and I was a delegate this year. I'm a part of the Merrimack Association, serving as the pastor in the Dunbarton Congregational Church.
And my name is Glenn Vodra, and I'm from South Congregational Church in Concord, New Hampshire, and this was my second synod.
Thank you all. So we're going to start with some questions to explore so that people can learn a bit about what happened at General Synod. One of the significant sets of events that happened at General Synod is there was lots to do with leadership and leadership transition. We said goodbye to Jim Mose, who has served the national setting for many years now as our Associate General Minister for Global Engagement and Operations. We elected a new Associate General Minister for Global Engagement in Kara Georgia Thompson. And we re-elected for a second term the Reverend Dr. John Dorhauer as our General Minister and President. And so I wanted to start by asking you about some of that leadership stuff that we spent time around. What for you were some of the significant leadership moments that stood out, and how did they inspire you? We will start with whoever wants to speak first.
Well, I'll jump in. A couple of things really struck me. One, first of all, Synod feels an awful lot like a New Hampshire town meeting. The groups really participate in a very democratic fashion. There's a lot of debate and discussion, but that to me was it felt very rewarding that we have an opportunity to make decisions about the future of the UCC, but also the fact that every individual congregation then makes a decision on its own, which of those decisions they're going to accept. But as far as the leadership was concerned, I was struck by two things. One was the humility of those individuals that were receiving recognition, extremely humble, really trying to deflect the credit from themselves off to the people that they worked with, to the churches around them, and to those that support them. That was the first thing that struck me, that there was really no ego involved. The second thing was that for every single person that was being recognized for their leadership or has been selected for leadership, they expressed their thankfulness to God. They really acknowledged that their reason for doing this was because of choosing their path to follow Christ, to do things for the betterment of the church, for the betterment of the world. Those are the two pieces that to me were most inspirational.
Are there others who want to speak about the leadership?
I think for me, one of the things that surprised me was the re-election of John Dorhauer. I was expecting it to be just sort of a procedural vote. John Thomas and Jeffrey Black had both been elected for several years, and I was just kind of expecting it to be a nothing vote, but it turned out to have discussion, have meeting. I was impressed with the way that John Dorhauer really dealt with that and talked about how he saw also the need for leadership in the female community and in the people of color, and how that would come into being in the next few years.
Yeah, I would like to ditto that as well. That is something that really amazed me, that he actually spoke about it and acknowledged that this, in fact, is the time when we do need to recommend other candidates, possibly women candidates, for that role. And I know that when Reverend Dorhauser was nominated previously, there had been some discussion because Jeffrey Black had been his predecessor. And it was just nice to see him, even though we accepted the nomination for the second term, to actually acknowledge that we are at the point in time where we need to be serious about other candidates, female candidates.
Well, speaking of female candidates, one of the female candidates that we had interaction with, because she came to one of our morning caucus meetings as the New Hampshire conference, was Kara Georgia Thompson, who was elected as our new Associate General Minister. Were there things that stood out either by what she said in plenary or what she said when she was with us as a delegation that you found particularly inspiring?
Well, I know for me that she seemed pretty inspired, or she seemed very called to that position, and then she was also very eager to start doing stuff, and she seemed like she was ready to just go in there and start working, and I thought that was pretty inspirational, that she had that energy to her where she was just motivated to start going at it.
Very good. Well, why don't we push on to another piece of the business at General Synod? And for many folks, this is often what they think of when they think of General Synod, is the resolution process. This year at General Synod, we had over 20 resolutions that were considered by the plenary. Most all of them passed, many relatively directly. We, as a body, finished our work even a bit early through the course of our time together. We had one resolution that did not pass. It was actually tabled and sent back to the board of directors to come at the concern in it a bit of a different way. For you all, what stood out in the resolutions we considered that you think is an important witness to the United Church of Christ as we move forward? And I know that is a big question.
Yes.
Well, I, for one, I served on a committee that dealt with a resolution concerning nuclear proliferation and urging the church to support efforts by the president, the U.S. government, to reduce nuclear proliferation worldwide. And one of the things that struck me about that is, number one, it's not a typical kind of an issue that we talk about in church on a Sunday, particularly in New Hampshire. But it was something that raises some very serious concerns about the future of mankind. And it got me certainly thinking about, well, what's the role of the church in this effort? Because it's a political issue, it's a social issue. But it really, I learned a lot from being on that committee. And I think that's one of the important things about Synod is the fact that each of these resolutions are discussed in great depth by committees, and a lot of the voting is dependent upon and the work and trust developed by various committees as they do their work.
I should probably mention really quickly as a tag to that this resolution known as the Back from the Brink Resolution, a very similar version of that will actually be coming up for consideration at our New Hampshire Conference annual meeting on October 19th. So we here at home will also be deliberating that and trying to decide whether we as a conference would like to adopt a similar resolution. Other pieces from other resolutions at Synod?
I attended the committee to talk about discontinuing the use of styrofoam or plastic foam, as it's correctly called, I found out. And just sitting in the committee, hearing the discussions, hearing the testimony, and realizing that we are not being good stewards of God's green earth, that I needed to be a little bit more active. And I noticed since returning that I intentionally avoid styrofoam. I notice styrofoam when I go places in to-go containers. I am just super, super aware of it. And just being immersed in that discussion has just changed my awareness. And I bring it up in conversations to people. It's like, we shouldn't be using this, and this is why. And I've never really been so outspoken about a single issue before. So ban the styrofoam.
So in this case, the wider community conversation has changed how you live out your faithfulness in your everyday.
Absolutely.
I think because of the way our UCC structure is, the resolutions at Synod give us the permission to say, sort of a backing to say they won't say you must, but they say you can. So, for example, the Styrofoam resolution, encourages us all to think about how we use Styrofoam. And it doesn't say you cannot use it in your church, because that's not who we are as UCC. But I think all of those, bringing them up in the churches, letting the churches think about them, even if the church doesn't vote to adopt or not adopt, it still brings it up in people's conscience and makes people think.
Right.
My sense of our resolution process this year, there were many moments when the question of church autonomy versus covenant was raised up. It was certainly a frustration point in the resolution process that I participated in around forced migration, in which folks kept saying over and over again, but how do we get the churches to actually do this work and engage in this conversation? And we had to all resound that sentiment so that we could find a place of unity to move forward with the resolution that was at hand for us. The forced migration resolution that we passed as a synod this year was for me a momentous occasion. Seeing that there was a very small group of people who didn't find a way to stand behind it when we voted on it. But that it passed so forcefully, and then also became a theme, a movement for us, I guess you could say, over the course of Synod, and that drawing us in as a denomination to understanding the theology of what it means to be migrants. Every single one of us comes from a family tradition that moved here to this country. and drawing us back to what does it mean to actually move from one place to another place, let alone be forced by the environment or political environments around us, or even violence in our homes, that those causes force people away from a place that they really want to call home. Migration is not something that happens because people really want to do it. So that was, for me, a beautiful theological moment in General Synod that made me proud of our denomination.
Thank you. So one of the quick things I just want to mention before we leave resolutions is, while we are at General Synod, we have a couple thousand delegates, which include all ages, including our youth, that simultaneously are doing their work as a plenary. At the same time, we also have a gathering that is, I was going to say exclusively youth, it's youth and their chaperones, called Youth at Synod. And this year, as in 2 years ago, the Youth at Synod chose 3 resolutions to speak to on the days. I know one of them was the resolution Susan mentioned, the resolution on plastic foam. And I will say 201 each time our youth spoke. I found that to be some of the more inspiring moments of our discernment and debate. They really brought some extra perspective to our conversation, and I was grateful that they did some of that more in-depth work along with the committees that were working on these resolutions. So for me, one of my loves of General Synod is the worship components, because it's not very often that we get to worship several thousand strong. That's a pretty unique and amazing experience. I love get to sing "Say a Humble" with a couple thousand other people. What from worship life as our time together at General Synod were the things that stirred your souls?
I think for me, the first night, Reverend Juza said, "When will Christians actually start protecting light?" And she said, what would it be like if the disciples had gathered around Jesus' cross when he was killed? And what would have happened if people took to the street the day after Jesus was killed in thousands, all his followers? And really got me thinking about what would it mean, what does it mean to be a Christian, and what can Christians do to actually start protecting the light?
To me, it was the most inspirational thing for me was the music, and not just traditional church music, but there were all types of cultural musical pieces included from the very opening, when the opening ceremony included asking the Native American tribe that originally settled in Milwaukee permission to hold our synod there, and the music that they used in the background, it just set the stage. And so to me, it was not just worshiping with those thousands of people, but also singing with them, and also seeing some musical performances and hearing some musical performances that were just incredibly, just brought tears to my eyes, in fact.
And in fact, one of the theological reflectors at this synod was a musician, and she composed 2 pieces that she performed at one of the last worship services, I believe. And they were so great, and we all sang along to them, and that was something that really inspired me as a musician, that even when you're sitting in a room full of people deliberating and having business, there's always time where like poetry can come out and things can be musical.
I will also comment on the music. I just found it just so amazing, all the different instruments and music. And when I hear music that I really enjoy, I sway to the rhythm of the music. And I was swaying for 6 days. Every time the music would come on, I would just I would just feel it, and to see other people respond that way, that to me was the absolute best part, was just to hear all this beautiful music and everybody joining together in it.
She's totally telling the truth. I watched her swaying, so.
You know, the opening ceremony and worship service in which we asked for permission to worship on the land and meet on the land was, for me, a momentous occasion, and a moment of this wonderful level of awareness in which we as a denomination used the words colonization, and we recognize the realities of living in a post-colonial society. I feel like in all the synods that I attended in college and seminary, now as an adult, this is the first time that I feel like I've really heard those words used. But then we were on sacred ground together in a more unified way. And we came to the table, and we had the sacrament of communion together. And I remember walking up the floor meditatively with all the other delegates, with all the other attendees, with all the other national staff members, and we were all one, walking up to the table to partake in the cup and in the body. And it was this beautiful moment of recognizing our unity.
So I'm going to offer my 2 cents on this one too. We've talked a lot about the beginning. For me, the worship moment that really I left with was way at the very end. One of the last things we did at our last worship service on Tuesday night is we had this prayer litany where I don't even remember what the question was, but we were all asked to write prayers on slips of paper. And the folks up leading worship read those off, and the response we were asked to offer was, yes, let's. That was a different enough prayer response that I just found such deep meaning in it. As, you know, we'd say, you know, we want to be a community of justice. Yes, let's. We want to be a community of welcome. Yes, let's. We want to be a community that's transformative. Yes, let's. I thought that was just a really beautiful worship moment. So I am going to surprise you all for a moment, because in the course of our conversation, I realize there's a question that I should be asking that I haven't offered to you beforehand. And that is, does anybody have any comments, inspiration from our keynoter who spoke?
All right, so I think for me, hearing about how bad eviction can be for families was definitely something that was, it both like broke my heart, but it also inspired me. And the fact that he kind of studied the area that we were in, that was something that we had kind of expected to hear about more, because it was what they invited us to think about when we were visiting Milwaukee, was that Milwaukee is great and there's a lot of cool things there, but there's also poverty and people are getting kicked out of their homes. And so for me, it was kind of just a moment, again, as was said before, that it was another moment of like awareness and realizing what's around us and who we're interacting with, and where we are.
Yeah, what struck me, and then also talking to some folks afterwards, is there's got to be a better system that balances the needs of people to keep them from being evicted, or if there are special circumstances that they face, but also respecting the rights of people that own the property, that make sure they're not being manipulated or misused, or the system's not being gamed, because it seems like there's obviously, to any issue, there's two sides to that. And certainly we as a church, we're always concerned that people are not being abused, they're not being taken advantage of, that poverty is addressed, that people have a place to live that's safe, and warm. So there's overall that the system is broken and needs to be fixed. That's what I heard out of it.
So I should claim I introduced this question rather poorly. Our keynoter for General Synod was Dr. Matthew Desmond, who has written a book. I'm not going to get the entire title correct, but it's on eviction. We actually invited folks from across the United Church of Christ to read the book going in, the book was about eviction in the Milwaukee community. And I think it was really powerful. I found it even more engaging than I anticipated. So there's a lot that we've covered that all happens in the plenary hall, but there's a whole bunch that happens in Synod that happens outside of those plenary hall hours, everything from our 6:30 in the morning delegation caucus meetings to time spent in the vast exhibit hall with folks representing all kinds of the ministries of the United Church of Christ, to committee work on resolutions and educational intensives. And on Monday, many of our delegates, a couple thousand people strong, joined with an interfaith community in a demonstration outside of an ICE office. I'm putting a whole bunch of stuff together, but what from the things that happened outside of the walls of the plenary hall stood out for you from this General Synod?
I'm going to step away from that particular moment, Gordon, and recognize Debbie Glein Allen, who received an award at Synod this year. Debbie is one of our own. I met Debbie back when I was a high school student on the youth cabinet here in the state, and she has been such a powerful voice and empowerer of youth all across New England and all across our denomination, and for her work to be recognized at Synod was beautiful, and I think a source of pride for our conference.
I think that is absolutely answering my question, Stacy. Yes, the Association of United Church of Christ Educators present a award at each Synod. I'm not recalling the name of it, but it's pretty much equivalent to a Lifetime Achievement Award. And our own Debbie Glein Allen was the recipient of that, and several of us were privileged to be able to be there and celebrate that moment with her.
Great. Gordon, for me, I always find the Expo Hall to be a real, a different way of looking into the workings of our church. To be able to walk around and see the various booths and tables, the various seminaries are represented there, the various missions of the church, things as, dealing with operations such as the pension fund are there. The bookstore gives me an opportunity to look and see what are the things that, well, maybe I should be reading to learn more about what's happening theologically or spiritually or operationally with the church. There's a lot of tools and things that I was able to bring back to my congregation. So I've always enjoyed the Expo Hall as an opportunity to learn more about the UCC and learn more about opportunities to serve.
I'm constantly reminded of, at any of these events, how small the world is. I had the opportunity to meet up with a minister from Massachusetts who was a camper in my cabin when I was a camp counselor in the late 80s. And we went to lunch together, and he said that he's serving as a term minister in a church that's struggling. And they're not sure if they're going to stay open or close. And I said, wait a minute, you've got to meet this minister from New Hampshire. And he said, oh, I just met with her. I spent an hour with her, and we're going to be in touch. And so it really kind of shows that no matter what you're dealing with in your church, there's another church who has dealt with the same thing. And you can bounce ideas off each other, and somebody knows somebody that has an answer for you, or at least you're willing to listen to you.
Excellent. Oh, go ahead.
Just one more thing. Something that it just came as a real surprise to me. My two sons were involved in scouting and both attained the rank of Eagle Scout. And there was always a part of scouting that discouraged the LGBT discussion, community, peoples, etc. And there was a woman there with buttons that had the rainbow on it, and it said Scouting for All. And she is part of a group that is moving to have more influence in scouting decisions, especially since a lot of scouting historically had been run by the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they had a very powerful message that they would always push forward. And to see that there was actually someone else who was taking this and pushing forward really did my heart good, to see that a program that I had such a good experience with would now maybe hopefully be open to everyone to enjoy the benefits of it. So that was just a total shock. I spent probably a good hour just talking with her. It was wonderful.
Thank you all. I'm going to feel grateful to get through that question without any reference to tricycle videos or anything. And I'm going to end with one last question, which I'm hoping each of you can speak to for a moment. And that is, coming out of your General Synod experience, what were you most excited to come back and share, talk about with the folks at your home church?
For my church, we are talking about the possibility of becoming a creation justice church. And so I was very interested in the resolution supporting the new Green Deal and the resolution on Styrofoam, and bringing those back and saying, look, the church now is supporting this also. And let's think seriously about how we move forward, either becoming a creation justice church or just being more conscious about our decisions and how we operate as a church and how we operate as individuals. So I think the creation justice part and the two resolutions dealing with that will come back with me.
Wonderful.
To me, it's the concept of becoming a immigrant welcoming church, and it's particularly timely for the church in Hampton, where I am, because we were actually, I like to tell people we were founded in 1638 by immigrants. So it makes sense to me that we carry on that concept and that tradition. And so it's something that I'm hoping that I'll be able to stimulate that discussion based on what I learned at Synod.
Okay.
I found myself being pulled in two different directions in terms of what I'm bringing back from General Synod. The first is a collection of resources on church vitality, and the Southwest Association has been engaging in a conversation on what makes a vital church, having just had Don Remick offer a presentation to us. And so trying to expand on the resources that we bring into the churches that are a part of the association and that are a part of the conference. So I came back with a list of guest presenters that we could call on, and a number of different books that we could all read as an association, or others could join us. So I brought those back. And then I also came back with this need to, at one point in my past experiences with our association, there was a few members who came up to me who said, it would be really great if we had a church collective service project or mission trip or immersion experience for adults, where our lay people from all over could be a part of. So I came back with a few different centers that we could go and visit for an immersion project. So those are a couple pieces that I find myself working on now that I'm back from Synod.
Excellent, thank you.
For me, I think I'm going to bring back a lot of that consciousness and looking at how, just looking at the broader world and what's going on around us, whether it's forced migration, whether it's problems with styrofoam buildup, whether it's churches saying that they want to be different than standard church, just learning more about who we are as people on this earth and what's going on around us. I think I could share that with not only people at my home church, but also people who I interact with day to day, just making them more conscious about things that are happening.
I guess in addition to maybe bringing back awareness about the styrofoam that now I've become, entrenched in, or entrenched in preventing, I would like to find a way, if there maybe is a way to get some of the keynote speakers a recording of his to bring to the church and show and have it as an evening discussion, do something like that. And it's so hard to explain to somebody what that's like and to feel that energy. But if you could bring that to the folks in church and have them see what it was all about, I just think that would be really, really powerful. It's so hard to bring something back. And I want to bring back something specific that just may trigger some passion and in someone to do more justice work.
So I do know that all the plenary sessions were recorded, and I am sure they are available someplace on the United Church of Christ website. I don't know exactly where that location is off the top of my head, but we will try to look that up, and you or anyone watching our webinar today can inquire of the conference office, and we'll try to let you know where those can be found if you want to hear the recording of Matthew Desmond.
Excellent.
So I want to thank each and every one of you, first for your service to and on behalf of the New Hampshire Conference, acting as a delegate to General Synod. And I want to thank you for joining us today and helping others know what this General Synod, the 2019 General Synod in Milwaukee was about. So thank you for sharing your experience and wisdom with us. And
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
You're very welcome. And for those watching, we want to let you know that we hopefully will be back sometime in August with the next in our webinar series, and we invite you to keep a lookout for that. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.